hold music. You want to avoid it, and so do your customers. So say goodbye to hold music and hello to faster, smarter support with Salesforce. Make service more personal and agents more productive using built-in trusted AI. Then watch costs and wait times drop and satisfaction soar. Support customers in a whole new way with Service GPT. Learn how at salesforce.com/servicegpt.
Welcome to Nature-Backed podcast of Single Earth. In this podcast, we are talking with investors about the vision of the new green world. My name is Tarmo Virki, and in this episode, I'm talking with Andreas Schwarzenbrunner from Speedinvest. Enjoy the show. Good morning, Andreas. Thanks for joining us at Nature-Backed.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Tell a little bit about Speedinvest. In the European startup scene, many people have probably heard Speedinvest, but what's the story of the investment company?
Actually it has changed the last couple of years that people heard about us. So at the beginning, it was not really the case. So Speedinvest was founded in 2011. So we are around now for 11 years. We focus on software, digital startups in an early stage with a focus on pre-seed and seed companies. Over the last 11 years, we invested in around 250 companies and actually started 11 years ago with a very small fund, a 10 million fund. And how this got started, actually, our founders have been in the startup world themselves. They founded a software startup straight after uni. It was one of the early companies in mobile content back then when there was no iPhone. And then basically they went through the whole roller coaster, like .com bubble 2000, 2001. Then it went back up again and sold the company in 2005 to VeriSign in the US. They moved to the Valley and got a bit like the American Valley vibes. And they always thought like, why are they not actually pre-seed, seed investors existing like there is in the US, like very hands-on that really can help the startups have operational background and experiences, entrepreneurial experience, and really can help the startups to scale in very early days because their experience with their investor was always quite bad back then. And that's why they said, okay, this is actually what we think is needed. And they started when they moved back to Austria. So they're all actually Austrian, moved back to Austria. They started to do like angel investments. And this was basically then the beginning of Speedinvest and led to the first fund of around 10 million in 2011. By now it's above $1 billion in assets under management. And as said, we have invested 250 companies since then. But this was the beginning, and it really still, I would say, shapes our DNA. So we have a very strong operational focus. That means a lot of our team members have an entrepreneurial background themselves. We also have two teams internally that work operationally with our portfolio companies. One is everything around people, HR, hiring, and the other is everything around marketing, growth, sales, because we identified this, especially in the first 2-3 years in the startup phase journey, this is where we can support most. And this is still in the DNA of Speedinvest. That's a bit in a nutshell what we do. I mean, as said, we started in Vienna, but have offices now in Munich, Berlin, London, Paris. And I'm based in Stockholm. So actually we are spread out across Europe and was quite an interesting journey in the last 11 years at Speedinvest.
Sector-wise, is mobile and digital still somehow in focus, or have you kind of become generalist?
We started generalist. And then we realized a couple of years ago, actually, what is it that startups really want, right? There's so much capital on the market. And if you are a great founder, you can choose your investor. It's not the other way around. It's that the founder can choose to invest on. So we said, okay, besides our operational support and focus, what is it that we actually can bring to the table to win good deals? And this is where we started to form our sector focus teams. And because we realized, especially in pre-seed seed, founders really appreciate it if they have a team that A, understands their space, understands their business model, but B, also has relevant network in terms of sales and business development for my specific sector or vertical. And that's why we started to form our sector focus teams actually in 2017, and that's still the case until today. I mean, the teams developed a bit, new topics came up, but by now we have 6 focus teams. One is deep tech, the second one is SaaS, the third one is consumer marketplaces, the fourth one is industrial and climate tech, the fifth one is fintech, and what did I forget now? Health, consumer marketplaces, SaaS, deep tech, fintech, industrial and climate tech. Already 6, so didn't forget anyone.
So industrial.
Early in the morning.
No worries. The industrial and climate tech go together. What's the industrial, or why they are linked?
So climate for us is quite. I mean, you can come to that later. It's for us. It's an horizontal topic, right? There can be consumer topics in climate. There can be fintech topics in climate, but on the B2B side, we realized that what we looked at in, let's say, an industrial side is like all the big heavy emitting sectors, right? Manufacturing, logistics, energy, agriculture, mobility. All those sectors are causing the big chunk of emissions, and that's why they have a big pressure to change the business model, to invest in new technology, new innovation, to reduce emissions. And there's a very strong link of, let's say, the old industrial world and everything around climate tech, right? Because in the end of the day, those are the ones that need to adapt, that need to change in order that we really can reduce emissions. And that's why we look at it from a B2B perspective, mostly at these sectors. But on climate in general, we look at it horizontally. So that can be across teams as well. But it's mostly, I would say, consumer marketplaces, fintech, and industrial tech, where climate plays a real role. Because if you look at health, et cetera, there are not that many.
Makes a lot of sense, and I really like the logic of combining it with the sectors where the impact is the biggest in a way. That's a really nice approach, I have to say. The how much do looking at your portfolio? How much have you guys done? Purely climate tech investments, or maybe climate-driven investments? Because, as you said, logistics investment could be totally climate-driven.
Yes. It depends a bit on how you define it, right? I think that different people see it differently. We invested in around 20 companies in the climate tech space, and most of them happened within the last two to 3 years. So really, the last 2 to 3 years, we put more focus on climate tech. We did around 20 investments, and that's a quite a broad mix in topics. So from recycling to batteries to carbon offsetting, carbon accounting, ESG reporting software, as you mentioned, green logistics provider. So it's quite a broad mix of topic, but I would say the ones that we really define as climate tech are around 20 now and rising, that we invested in over the last 2 to 3 years. And we also see that climate tech is basically a maturing asset class, right? So there now you can see the rise of investors in climate tech money that goes into that space. And for us, we also want to double down on it, and we want to continue to invest and even invest more in climate tech companies over the years to come. And I think we have actually built quite a nice portfolio for now.
Many people say that there is more money than great founders in climate tech. you also referred earlier that basically for the great founders there is always kind of more money, and they can choose their investors in the team. Do you see this balance even bigger in the climate sector? Is climate sector so hot that there is more money than companies?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I would say on the one hand, a particular subset of climate tech companies, there's way more demand than there are companies. But there's a strong subset of climate tech companies, everything that goes way more into R&D, infrastructure, hardware, etc., where there are not that many investors. So I think there's a gap between, let's say, the software digital focused climate tech companies versus the ones that are really into more development of new ideas, R&D, infrastructure, and hardware. So I think there the situation is a different one.
Yeah, I totally understand that. What could those deep tech hardware companies do to change the situation? Do they need to take the money from somewhere else than VC sector, or is there somebody building the VC funds with a 20-year focus to do the deep tech?
I think it's not. So much about the companies. I think it's really about the investor scene that needs to adapt. I think the investor scene. Of course, there is a strong foundation of, let's say, government money, EU-backed money, and everything on the green transition. Then there is a strong subset of investors on the, let's say, much later stage, private equity that invests in infrastructure. There was a big announcement also from Apollo yesterday. They want to invest 100 billion in decarbonization projects. So there's a lot of things already happening. I think the gap is really on the, let's say, early stages from C to A, where people want to develop a new idea and have not maybe yet found let's say, the right business model, customers, etc. And I think there the investor scene needs to adapt, because if you are serious about climate tech and if you are serious about decarbonization and reducing emissions, the investors scene, including us, have to realize that there is no way around hardware, right? In the end of the day, if you really look at the hard problems, in climate tech, and there are so many things that can't be solved otherwise. It's about reducing emissions when you produce, concrete and steel. It's about new ways of electrified mobility and charging infrastructure, where there's also no way around building the charging infrastructure. Then if you look at energy storage and hydrogen solutions, there's no way around building the storage facilities. And all those things, I think investors need to adapt and realize that if you're serious about it, and you have to tackle these problems as well. And that's why I think a lot of funds will adapt and some won't do that, which is also fair if you say this is not what we're investing in. And I think this will, on the other hand, but then also up a new field of investors that we already see, right, in the last 2-3 years, a lot of new climate tech investors popping up. And I think there will also be a new investor scene for that space popping up.
You were referring about being serious about this scene and so on. That always reminds me of the latest reports we are reading on the seriousness of the problem the sector is trying to solve. How do you usually take out the latest IPCC report and see that basically pardon my French, but we're fucked? Can the startups actually change the world here?
We have to try, right? So what's the alternative? The alternative is giving up now. I don't think that's a real alternative. I think we really need to try, and we have to pull the triggers on multiple fronts, right? This is really on policy making. This is about the investor scene, but this is also about fostering and supporting entrepreneurship and new ideas, new technologies that can solve those problems. And it's also about the corporates, and especially let's say heavy emitting industries that need to adapt faster and can also can be a huge driver for new technology and ideas and those startups as well. So I think in the end of the day, it's a mix of multiple fronts, and also the fifth one is obviously each one of us as individuals who can adapt their lifestyle, which is obviously always the hardest, because I always believe that if you really want to change stuff, you need to give people a better alternative, because otherwise they won't do it. And in the end of the day, I think it's a mix of all of this, and we need to try, and we need to try harder, because I don't think that there is an alternative to that.
Yesterday, I saw statistics from Bolt, where they said that 80% of the consumers will not pay even 1% more for sustainable alternative, which was quite stunning. I mean, the 20%...
How many percent of the consumers?
80. 80,
yeah. Yeah, I think it depends a lot between different countries. I think there are a lot of countries who are already, I think there's a percentage of people who are willing to pay a premium. A green premium is, I think, much higher. But yeah, I think very much in line to what I think as well is that if you don't have a real alternative. But it also, I think the question of price is always a bit about how we're pricing in externalities, right? Because in the end of the day, people pay prices where there's not everything priced in what they're actually causing by doing that. And that's why it's always a bit of an unfair comparison, because that on so many fronts we are subsidizing old industries, or we are having low taxes on specific sectors and industries. And so in the end of the day, and also the question is really on how we really price in CO2. And then I think if you really do this properly, a price comparison looks different.
It probably depends a lot on the sectors. I mean, I think the classical things are like nuclear energy, that nobody really counts those 1,000 years. Somebody has to keep the waste somewhere. It's kind of outsourced cost to the governments or something like that, and probably many other sectors also. But bringing the real cost to the product would probably help in many products to turn consumers more aware of their sustainable choices.
Yeah. That's a big part of changing a system, right? It's like having information in place that people really know what is it that we're actually talking about. And it's that, I don't know, it's my impression that a lot of people just lack that kind of information and about what is actually causing what, and if I buy this kind of meat, is it bad, or is it good, or even there's, in the end of the day, there's not bad or good, right? It's like, and how, like how is my consumption and my behavior really affecting the planet? And I think there's a lot of wrong info out there, and there's a lot of miscommunication as well. And I think that's makes it really hard for people to really understand it, because I don't know how about you, but so many people I know and friends I know where really, I would say, are smart, educated people, but don't really have the information to really charge what is it actually that I should do or can do, right?
I think greenwashing is really extensive these days in Europe. I mean, I see, the bigger the company, the greener is their messaging. There's, probably a local competitor who has done everything green from the day zero, but then comes a global conglomerate whose big advertising slogans are all green.
Yeah. It's. I always wonder if this is good or bad, right? Because I think in the end of the day, greenwashing, but better greenwashing than nothing, maybe. That's a bit of because at least then it's out there, right?
And in the consumer mind.
But yeah, of course, in the end of the day, it often doesn't really have a big effect then.
That's true. If you go to the events these days, when the events are actually again happening and you can meet people in 3D, what kind of companies you're looking at? What kind of stories? What kind of sectors in there? I mean, as this podcast is about the green economy and the green future, focusing on maybe climate tech space.
In climate tech, we actually look at roughly 6 target sectors, right? So it's circular economy, smart electrified mobility, construction and buildings, energy transition, measuring, importing, financing a green transition, and the 6th one is food and agriculture. And I would say those are the main areas we look at. And within that, we really look at companies that can create value through technology, particularly not saying purely software, but creating value through technology, and have a strong technological component in a large and growing market that really have at the same time a positive, let's say, social environmental impact. That is roughly what we're looking at, and within those areas, obviously trends come and go. So we spend a lot of, and also our, and also if you're really keen on investments and we've done investments, we might move on to another topic. So we spent, for example, the last 2 years, a lot of time on waste and recycling, and we did 2 investments in that space, and still would be, I guess, open to do more, but at least we've done now 2 investments. We've done our research, we've looked at the space in particular. As the other one is also solar. For example, we did 2 investments in the solar space where we spent a lot of time on. And there will be other topics where we are, for example, let's say 2 examples where we now really try to smarten ourselves up and look into it. Is food is all, which for us is a bit something we're not experts in, and the other one is everything around hydrogen, where we really want to understand, okay, what is it that are actually interesting areas where we could invest in. So topics come and go, but I would say always within those 6 sectors, and how those 6 sectors will be transformed in order to transition to a zero carbon economy.
The putting together the energy transition and your Austrian roots, I have to ask how the current geopolitical situation in Europe is impacting your maybe drive to invest in the energy transition, or do you see some kind of peak in the interest towards this sector?
You mean because we in Austria and Germany are dependent on Russian oil and gas? So the way I look about it is so what is happening in Ukraine is accelerating things on the Green Deal, right? So if you look at all the topics that are within the European Green Deal, and especially the ones about the energy transition, all those things will happen now much faster than they are planned. That is my assumption, and I think we can see that, especially now for us being present in Germany and Austria and having a lot of Germans and Austrians in the team, is that there is a public debate about what are our alternatives and how can we increase the share of renewables while at the same time decrease our dependence on Russian oil and gas. And this is now happening, and there is a strong public pressure on adapting and doing that. And that's why I think for startups in this space, let's say in energy transition in general, this is a big wave they can ride, and that's why I think there will be a lot of investment going into everything around renewables, everything around hydrogen, and everything around energy savings, because that's the other part of the component. That's the other component, right? So it's not only where do we get our energy from, but also how can we reduce our energy consumption. And I think those 2 things will happen now at massive scale. It's my feeling.
it must be one of the first places or first times ever in the EU history that something is happening faster than planned, right?
Yeah, but we don't know yet. Hopefully it will happen. That's true. Or maybe now it will happen in time.
For the EU, that would be a big deal, I have to admit. You made this interesting point that, the crisis is kind of so, I would say, immediate that there's actually no other option than to try to fight the situation. The kind of, the nature of the entrepreneurship or nature of VC investment that, giving up is not really an option. I really like that logic, and I think that's probably something which I hope the listeners will also take home with from this episode. Looking ahead into this year, what makes you, think? What's the interesting thing going forward now? Is it the energy transition you're really excited about, or?
As said, I think those are it's those 6 sectors, and within that we are opportunistic, right? Because in the end of the day, it's about having a strong founder team, a market that we think is interesting, and the business model that works, and if you are too picky, or if you are already in advance, like too narrow, it's really difficult. So that's why we say, okay, those are the areas we want to invest in. Those are the things we want to see, like a strong technological component. It's a fast and growing market. It's a big and growing market, and they have an environmental and social impact. And if we look at those areas and within those 6 sectors, or if you look at this within those 6 sectors, there we want to be flexible, right? It's in the end of the day, it's also a lot about teams driving it. And for example, we spent a lot of time on also recently on the topic about heat pumps, right? And I could never thought about it that years ago I would have said that we're excited about heat pumps. But if you have the right opportunity and that you think it makes sense and there's a cool team tackling the market, then it's a really cool area.
Heat pumps, something to take home with from this year, basically, or this winter. Heat pumps. That's an interesting startup sector.
Yes, and nobody really thought about heat pumps until this year, right? So,
in the north, we always think about heat pumps, and but looking at the rest of the Europe, not really. That's true. Thanks, Andreas, for this chat, and we'll see you at the next startup conferences. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye. Join us again for the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please give us a good rating and leave the feedback in your podcast player so others will find it too. We will be back next week. Turn on to Nature-Backed Podcast.
Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? This is Lawrence Ross, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my podcast, The Lawrence Ross Show.
Egomaniac.
It's a 2-hour weekly exploration into my mind. I also do sketches, celebrity impersonations.
You're out of order!
And I also do song parodies. Not too shabby for a blind guy.
Not only are you visually impaired, but you are geographically impaired.
New episodes are released every Friday. Check it out on your favorite podcasting platform or listen to it here on Society 13 on Electricast.
Are you a fan of classic cinema or a young person who wants to discover the best films of all time? Do these legendary movies still hold up?
On the Generation Film podcast, 2 guys who grew up when movies dominated the culture share a great film with a panel of young movie lovers and see how it plays for today's generation.
We discuss changes in storytelling styles, representation,
The making of each film, its initial reception, and how its meaning has changed over the years.
Join us as we explore cinema classics across generations on Generation Film.
Electricast. Electricast.